the Kremlin is learning the hard way that Trump is not in any way someone that can be counted on. Russia has made very, they've had very little success when you look at the situation in the long term from when they invaded in February of 2022. I mean, they're still, I think, only maybe 19. They've occupied 19% of Ukrainian territory, and recently their advances have been much slower. So again, we're talking about a somewhat longer process, but I think at some point, yes, Russian citizens are going to really sort of lose their support. The support of Russians for the war is going to diminish, and I think that there will be dissatisfaction with the Putin regime. It's and particularly now that the economy isn't doing well. So I think unless Russia is able to make some really substantial advance in this new offensive, if the war is drawn out, I think it's undermining Putin's authority. And I might add that um, the the fact that Putin has sort of aligning that Trump in aligning with Putin earlier vis-a-vis the peace in Ukraine and so on and so forth, and all this talk about easing sanctions and better relations. Another big plus for the Kremlin was the fact that the relationship that the U.S. has with its NATO allies is becoming very strained. And, this is exactly what the Kremlin wants, because, of course, it fears NATO more than anything. So this was very encouraging to watch the European allies become disenchanted with the US and vice versa. But on the other hand, a side effect of this is that Europe is now deciding that they're really going to try to pull out all the stops to support Ukraine. So I think that, for Putin, things have not gone all that well.
Well, I do want to come on to Europe in just a moment, but meanwhile, in the US, I mean, last week Trump had said he was pissed off with Putin over the negotiations. How does the Kremlin take that sort of language and threat? And do you think the Russians have, historically, how would the Kremlin and Russia deal with a kind of more bellicose and slightly unpredictable actor like Trump?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, everybody seems to find Trump very difficult to work with because he operates, he follows his instincts, and his instincts aren't necessarily rational or you can't predict what he's going to do. And I think that Putin and his colleagues in the Kremlin are kind of learning the hard way. Now, it's interesting because there's there was a lot of speculation a few weeks ago about Trump actually having sort of aligned himself with Russia a long time ago. When he went over in 1987, he wanted to build a hotel in Moscow, and he met with all these Russians and a couple of defectors, former KGB officials, officers, have said that Trump actually kind of made an agreement that he was going to promote the Kremlin's interests as a sort of an agent of influence way back, right? Now, these allegations have been made many times before, but it's interesting because I haven't discounted that possibility at all when I saw how Trump was cooperating last month with Putin. But now he's done a kind of an about face. And so I think that maybe he isn't kind of under the thumb of Putin, And more likely, he just basically will do anything to make a deal. And if the deal doesn't work, he'll just turn around and change his mind. So I think that, yeah, I think that the Kremlin is learning the hard way that Trump is not in any way someone that can be counted on.
And there's been a slightly back and forth reaction to Trump so far. I mean, Putin and the Kremlin did seem to stop calling for Zelensky to be removed, but then that only really lasted for a matter of weeks. I mean, is there any sign that the Russians feel any need at this point to drop any of those key sticking points on Ukraine about leadership, disarmament, shrinking the military?
No, Putin made that very clear last year. I think it was in June when he gave a long speech. They keep talking. Putin and Kremlin officials keep talking about the underlying causes of the Ukraine conflict, and those underlying causes are the NATO alliance, the fact that it's come so close to Russia's borders, the fact that the Kiev regime is it needs is illegitimate and needs to be removed. So these underlying causes have been made very, very clear, and I don't see Russia backing off from those demands unless, for some reason, um, it doesn't succeed in in making any military advances, and support for the war at home it sort of erodes. I would say that if Trump really wanted to end this war, um, he should have, at the very beginning of the right after he was inaugurated, um, announced that he was going to give more military aid to Ukraine. And if he rallied around his NATO allies and they all, together decided that they were going to really, really, really support Ukraine so they could win this war, that would be something that that would have been something that would have forced the Kremlin to be much more flexible in terms of its peace negotiations. But right now, with NATO sort of splintered, I don't think we can count on that.
Trump threatened oil when he made those pissed off comments. He threatened further sanctions. I mean, how heavily is Putin relying on oil revenues for this conflict? And are they going to be concerned about oil starting to dip because of the trade war between the US and China?
They're very concerned about gas and oil, the price of gas and oil dropping, and I think that I'm not. I'm not convinced. I think sometimes when Trump talked about tariffs, well, now of course that he's excluded Belarus and Russia from tariffs right now. But I think when Trump makes those threats, it's more to show people here and in the West that he's strong and he's not letting Russia, push him around. The drop in oil prices that are a consequence of Trump's trade war, of course, are something that are entirely different. And yes, they are a big threat.
And how serious could it be for Putin if these negotiations do collapse? I mean, he may be willing to continue the war in Ukraine, but is the rest of Russia?
Well, as I said, I mean, the Russian people are in general very patient, as shown by the fact that they've stood by their leader, Vladimir Putin, now for all this time, after over 3 years of a conflict in which thousands and thousands of Russians have died. Um, but I do think that it's entirely possible that if Russia does not continue to make advances in Ukraine, and if the economy in Russia deteriorates further and inflation goes up, I think, and there are more and more the deaths of Russian soldiers, and also mobilization, where you've got younger Russian soldiers being drawn into the war. I do think at some point that the Russian people are going to lose, that they will not support the war, and their approval of Vladimir Putin will also decline.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Louis Sykes. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news and analysis, or read it on thetimes.com. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.